where you can actually be virtually in an office and walk around following people. So I don't know how you feel about that. On the one hand, you might feel that it's slightly creepy, and on the other hand, maybe it makes you feel more part of the team and part of the environment. So I suppose if you can do that, that might avoid some of these issues around not being part of the team or feeling connected to the organisation, which of course is a very important issue when we're talking about people working from home or working from co-working centres, working from a coffee shop or whatever. One of the major issues in the literature is that sometimes people feel isolated from their workplace. And today, of course, we can do this sort of thing. Isn't this fabulous? We're using Zoom. I've not used Zoom before. I mean, I think that this is fabulous. And we've got Skype, we've got phone calls. In some work I was doing in telehealth, actually, over the last year, when I was talking to general practitioners and specialists, trying to get specialist services in remote areas. It's probably similar to where you are. And for the most part, the doctors and the specialists are using Skype. And the reason why they use that is because a lot of these technologies that are available now are intuitive, quite easy to use, and they're available generally for free. And most people have access to them and can use them. And of course, we can still use the phone. And I put some examples on the slide there of some more technologies that are available for us to be able to collaborate and connect. So, those technologies are disruptive in one way, and in another way, they're helping us collaborate and communicate better, I think. There's an accelerating trend towards remote working, and I have some links there. I'm not going to go into those, but there's links on the slides that you can go into about some latest statistics on teleworkers in the US, and there's another survey there. And the statistics show that that telework is definitely a trend, but on the other hand, some of those statistics are disputed. And the reason for that is because how do you define what a teleworker is? A lot of telework, a lot of people working at home or working away from the central workplace, a lot of those people are not doing it in a formal arrangement. I mean, I work from home a lot, and I can do that as an academic. So, for example, yesterday, if I'm looking a bit tired, it's because I've been marking exams all day yesterday until 10 o'clock last night, our time, marking exams. So, but I do that at home. But I don't have a formal telework arrangement. And a lot of people, when they work from home or they work from other places, of course, that is not picked up in the statistics because people have an informal arrangement with their employer or their manager. It's more likely to be their manager rather than their employer. So a lot of these statistics are only captured for those that are in like a formal arrangement. There's also some issues around the benefits of working remotely. For example, I'm sure you've seen this in the media about a couple of years ago. Marissa Mayer from Yahoo said basically no more working from home arrangements. And Google discouraged working from home, and other organisations also discourage working from home. And when you look at what's happening I've got some Google alerts, so I'm looking at telework and what's in the media and what's happening. Some people are saying that working from home is a very good thing, and other people are saying, well, I really disagree. So you can find an argument for either side. But I think generally there's a trend towards more remote working because we have the technology and people want a more flexible workplace. Another issue is that aligning policies for remote working. And we have more and more people that are working in all sorts of different ways. So the days of everybody that works for an organisation actually having the same work arrangement, that is a full-time work arrangement, is gone. A lot of organisations now, they employ freelancers. people that they might find on a website like Upwork or freelancer.com to be involved in a particular project. There might be people you haven't never met, or there might be people you have to work with that could be anywhere in the world when you're working on a particular project. So it's trying to align these policies for remote working and thinking about what the issues are for managers operationalising these policies is an issue that sort of human resources still have to get their heads around. So what my research shows, and when you look at the literature, so I'm talking about it from a research perspective, this illustrates what one of the major issues is. So this is an article out of a newspaper here, and it says, a manager who went to the cricket during work was unfairly dismissed, the Fair Work Commission finds. Now, this particular manager, he said that he was working from home and then he went and got a plane and went to another city in Australia to watch his son play. Now, and he said that he had an arrangement, but he didn't really have an arrangement to work from home those 2 days. And he said because he's had his smartphone with him that, he could, he was still contactable and working from home. And the Fair Work Commission here in Australia said, yeah, well, that was fine. Dismissing him for those reasons was perfectly okay, but what wasn't okay was the communication to that particular employee, to explain to that employee that particular work arrangement that wasn't acceptable, and the consequences of him doing that would be dismissal. So that's why he was considered to be unfairly dismissed. So thinking about how we manage people that work in that have a remote work environment is really important, including communication and expectations. But I'll talk more about that in a moment. But you can see these sorts of things coming up. So what does the literature say? So I'm talking about what does the research say? And I'm saying that telework is still not business as usual in a lot of organisations. So some organisations have embraced telework or working from anywhere. Examples would include Cisco and Telstra. Have you heard of Telstra? Telstra is a communications company here, and in the last 12 months they have they now have a program called All Jobs Flex. And what that means is every single job in the organisation should be able to be undertaken in some flexible form. So that might be a shorter work week, it might mean a different work hours, but it certainly means working from home. So All Jobs Flex is a very interesting concept, and I've spoken to some people about that. It's very interesting. What you might not know is that telework has a long history, and the conversation began back in the 70s with Jack Niles. And that was around the time of the oil shocks, where the idea was that if you could have people working closer to the workplace, closer to their homes. So this began sort of having centres where people would be working closer to where they lived. So definitely booting the commute there. And the idea was that these places would have the technology infrastructure and the support services for people to work there. These like telecommuting centres. And it was only later that we started talking about people working from home, and people working from home when the technology became a little bit more acceptable. One of the key reasons, of course, from the 70s until now is to try and avoid this commute. Now, what's really interesting is that traffic congestion is not abated at all. In fact, what has happened is if you look at traffic congestion around the world, it's actually getting much worse. And you would think, with the technology that we have in place today, that you would think that it would help solve some of these problems. But it doesn't. I mean, I live in Sydney, and which is not a huge city in world terms, but the traffic seems to be getting worse every afternoon and every morning. So that's not so much fun. So the government policies to alleviate the traffic congestion just hasn't really solved the problem. And I know in Australia, of course, what we're doing is, we're building more infrastructure. So we're building more roads rather than thinking a little bit more about sustainable cities and more public transport and people working from home. And you can see that I have a little diagram here. So when I looked at the literature and I looked at what research is being done, really the first part was thinking about the government policy. The second part was technology infrastructure. The third component was management, which I've already talked about. I'll talk a bit more about that. And the last part really is service quality. That is, we still have to deliver. Basically, we still have to make sure that the customer is getting the service that they need. And that might be an internal customer. It doesn't have to be an external customer. So service quality, the quality of the service that we're delivering wherever we're working still has to be the same or better. So predictions. I think history is really interesting, because what happened in the 70s and 80s, there were futurists that were talking about significant changes in the way that we would work, and there were terms like electronic cottages being discussed, about people going back and working in their homes. So this is not a new concept. This is not new by any stretch of the imagination. And back in the late 90s, early 2000s, it was thought, and I have a couple of references there, it was thought that the internet would make telecommuting a mainstream work arrangement. So, I mean, that's 15 years ago now, or a little bit longer. And telecommuting is still not mainstream. And another prediction was that there would be significant reductions in transport costs, traffic congestion, and pollution. And this was Jack Niles talking about this back in the 1970s. So the adoption of telework, even though it was predicted, has been much slower than predicted. And I think that's, and the reason why I think it's important to understand that is to understand that there is a bit of a history there. So we have to maybe think about telework anywhere working a little bit differently. Okay, so government policy. So that was the first sort of area that I think is important, because in most jurisdictions, it's only a right to request. So in Australia and the UK, a lot of places in the US, for example, you can, as an employee or as a worker, you can go to your manager. Most organisations have flexible work arrangement policies, and you have the right to request. Okay, it's not, so you can go to your manager and say, I would like a flexible work arrangement. I would like to work from home 2 days a week, please. But the employer can refuse that request. So they can say, well, look, I'm sorry, but for business reasons, I'm going to have to say no. The other issue around this is that workers and managers, when you look at the research, and the research that I've done talking to workers and their managers, is they believe flexible work, particularly working from home and telework arrangements, are a privilege, not a right. And the other issue around this, I think, is it's often difficult to ascertain the competitive advantage. So how are we able to provide competitive advantage, provide a better service to the customer, for example? So with flexible work policies, it's not just about making the employee have, feel better and manage their work-life balance better. So we have to think a little bit bigger than that, in order to convince managers and organisations that telework and working from home is an appropriate option. Occupational work, health and safety. So the literature is very clear on this, and certainly in the interviews that I've done, reduction in work stress. So you can manage your life better. well, I can, better accommodation for those that might be disabled. It gives us better flexibility and reduction in commuting stress. So we have to, but the commuting stress is I think, an important one. So it's not just the fact that we're, sitting there for an hour in the traffic before you get to work isn't a good way to start the day. Risks, of course, so if your work environment is poor, so if you're working from home, if you haven't got, if the setup is not right, you don't have the right chair, for example, there's a lot of issues around social and professional isolation. Not feeling connected to the organisation is a big one. Another issue is family conflict. So if you're at home, you want to be working. So not everybody has the luxury of a separate office, so you can shut the door and keep people out. But if you're at home and somebody else is at home, they might want to have lunch with you or talk to you when you want to work. Lack of career advancement opportunities because you're not seen, and potentially increased workload rather than less workload. Legal obligations. Employers are responsible for physical and psychological worker well-being regardless of the work location. So we have the measure of workplace safety, for example, workplace incidents, absenteeism are non-existent for teleworkers. I haven't been able to find anything in that area. Income tax policy, of course, there's still a couple of issues around double taxation and the cost of income tax in different states, countries, and the compliance costs with that. That's not really a problem here in Australia, but it is in places like the US and in Europe. Transport policy, this is an interesting one too. It's difficult to ascertain the telework impact on traffic and congestion. And some of the literature talks about if organisations provide a company car as a car allowance, then it's more likely that people are going to be using their cars rather than take public transport, and less likely to stay at home. Reduction in greenhouse emissions. And now this is interesting. I've put a reference here for you as well if you're interested. There's something called total vehicle miles travelled, and some of the literature is saying that it doesn't necessarily reduce for telecommuters because telecommuters often take smaller trips, and trip frequency and residential location are important variables. And if the car is at home, say you've got one car, there might be other members of the family that start using the vehicle, and that might that there might be some issues with substitution effect there. So we might have some reduction in greenhouse emissions, but if you're at home, then you might sort of go to the supermarket, or you might go to the library, or you sort of might do smaller trips that might add up. And transport infrastructure, so the issues around the mix of transport policy responses such as bikes and public transport. And so I know in some cities, I mean, it's a bit cold where you are, I know at the moment, but in some cities, they have very good bike infrastructure where people can ride their bikes. In Sydney, that's not the case, but in places like Perth and Brisbane here in Australia, the bike lanes and things are very good, and people use those, which helps with traffic. Urban development is another area when we talk about government policy, so residential versus commercial zoning, and the infrastructure to support telework is really important as well. Just not working from home, but smart work centres, central offices. If people can go somewhere other than their home to work, often that can be a good option. Digital infrastructure, so the digital infrastructure in Australia, the National Broadband Network, it's not the same for everybody, but the digital infrastructure in Australia is funded primarily by our federal government, and in developing countries, a lot of the digital infrastructure is funded by the private sector. So having that, and I know your digital infrastructure is for working from more remote locations is quite good. The other thing, the last thing from a government policy perspective is that there were some initiatives by governments to really look at Telework Week. And that happened in Europe, it's happened in the US. And in Australia, with our change of government, is, we had Telework Week in 2012 and 2013 to encourage organisations and workers to try it. And we had all sorts of initiatives going on. But with the change in government in 2013, that's completely disappeared. No focus at all on telework or anywhere working. Now, technology, I explained earlier that back in the 1970s and the 1980s, we had telecentres and telecottages and satellite offices, all of those sorts of things. And there was a lot of hope that would continue. And we had office automation and teleconferencing, but even today, a lot of people don't use teleconferencing for meetings. And co-working hubs and third spaces for freelancers, small businesses, governments, as an alternative to a central office. So that's picking up pace a little bit. Intelligent transport systems, so the potential to improve traffic demand management, of course, so governments can look at that. Rural, remote versus suburban city. The quality of the digital infrastructure is very important, but I think we all know that. Media richness. So in terms of face-to-face contact, of course, if we're all in a room together, that's the richest communication media. Video is next, and then phone and email. So the type of communication tools and technologies that we need to support teleworkers is something that we need to really think about very carefully. So, of course, when I was part of a panel last week in Sydney talking about telework and why anywhere working and why and in the IT sector and why it's not business as usual. And one of the ways that one of the panellists dealt with it, with a lot of their employees out working from home and client sites, is that they try and have between 10 and 2 on a Friday, if as much as possible, everybody can commit to be there so they can have meetings and have lunch together and those sorts of things. So really trying to make sure that that their employees are connected to the organisation and feel that connection and feel like they're part of the team. And of course, social media can be helpful to help us collaborate and interact. And this homework divide issue, on the one hand, we've got the work-life balance, so we can work from home, but on the other hand, with technology, we can be available anytime, anywhere. So if somebody sends us an email, they almost expect a response straight away. And being available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week can be problematic. So let's talk about the management issues, because this is where there is a significant gap. Now, job autonomy, so designing jobs so you can work flexibly is really important. So a high level of autonomy, that is about your freedom to make decisions about work. So, and the research shows that it's related to job satisfaction and enhanced well-being, because we feel in control. That makes sense, doesn't it? But if you're working with team members and there's lots of interdependencies, working from home or working in a remote location can actually be a bit of a problem. So we have to think about classifying jobs. So the highly skilled knowledge workers versus the lower skilled. So jobs that are, like, for example, call centres. If you work in a call centre, you can measure that, and you can work from anywhere, and it's quite easy to do. Whereas some highly skilled knowledge workers, it's a bit harder to figure out. I'll talk about productivity in a minute, but it's a bit more difficult to try and manage knowledge workers, I suppose. So the question is here: can we design jobs so that all jobs are flexible. And Telstra, as I explained earlier, is trying to do that with their all jobs flex idea. And to what extent is this really possible? Is it desirable? Is it realistic? So thinking about jobs and how we design them is the first thing. Individual characteristics is another one. So it's a bit of a false assumption, I think, that all employees want to work flexibly and want a telework arrangement. There are a number of people in the interviews that I've done. What I did some research where I interviewed people that were teleworking, and I also interviewed people that were doing the same job that went to the office every day. And the people that I spoke to in the office every day, I said, well, wouldn't you like to work from home 2 days a week? And they said, why? Why would I want to do that? I like the idea of getting up in the morning and getting the train or the bus and having my day and then going home and not thinking about work. So, and then the other issue, of course, is some people think that they would like a work from home arrangement, a telework arrangement, but sometimes it doesn't work. So if it doesn't work, we have to think about how we bring that employee back. So what are the policies if that work arrangement is not really working? And really the hybrid approach, where we have some way of having a physical connection to the team, the organisation, for employee engagement, and that's a way to try and mitigate social and professional isolation. But of course that doesn't always work, does it? Because sometimes somebody might be working so remotely that it's very difficult for that to happen. And some people might not care about being that connected to the organisation. I interviewed a guy working for an organisation, and he had a remote work arrangement, and he worked on a remote farm, and he rarely came into the city, and he liked it like that. He really didn't want any more connection, but he worked by himself, and and that work arrangement suited him very well. He had a fairly autonomous job. We have to think about culture. We have to think about management support, recruitment and retention, business continuity planning. And the last thing I have here is tacit knowledge, how things work around here, how to collaborate and communicate. So obviously if you are, if you're not in the office very often, you don't, and don't feel part of the team, you don't sort of pick up on all those issues about who to talk to, who not to talk to, how things work, and those sorts of things. So when I had a technical problem earlier, I had to swap laptops because something happened to the one I was using earlier. I had to swap mine in, and I knew who to go to. I didn't call IT, by the way. I called somebody that works in the office here who's very helpful, and she understands these things, and so I knew who to go to. That's important. Work-life balance. So we might think that that work-life balance is going to be better if we're going to be working more from home, but we have an issue with overwork. So you see this person here, you see this picture I've got here of this person having their breakfast while they're checking their emails or doing some work. Now, so that's what people tend to do. So instead of getting in the car at 7:20 in the morning to go to work, what people do, instead of having breakfast with their family or reading the newspaper or going for a run or doing whatever, what they do is they get straight on and they start working. So that's part of the issue with this productivity idea. People tend to be doing more work rather than less. So there's a term called polluted time, where work impinges on other areas of life. Social and professional isolation, I've already talked about that. Reasonable accommodation, I think this is an area I think that this is going to become more important, because we're all getting, I'm getting older, we're all getting older. So if we want to stay in work, we transition to retirement, managing a diverse workforce, keeping people engaged, people that are disabled. So how are we going to make sure that we can keep those people in the workplace, in the workforce? Sometimes it's just too much for people to have to go to work 5 days a week. I've mentioned productivity a little bit, but productivity, it's often to do, people self-report it. And so, of course, you're going to say that you're more productive when you're working from home, even if you're not. And I find when I'm working from home, sometimes I get a little bit distracted, you know, because there's washing to be done, this to be done, that to be done. But, you know, it's, so I think that issue around productivity is one that we need to explore a bit further. And service quality, all right. So the service climate, the level and frequency of face-to-face between workers and customers, when to use technology in a particular interaction and when a personal touch is required versus when is it okay to do things, you know, over Skype or phone call or whatever. And this issue about availability, long hours, presenteeism, like being in the office, is the norm in many organisations, particularly in the finance sector and other industries. So we have to think about what the appropriate combinations of technology-mediated interactions are, the individual touch, customisation for customers, and some industries, sectors will be successful in automating transactions while others require high touch. So can we boot the commute? Yes, of course we can. But, you know, we've got the technology to work from anywhere. And look at this. This is wonderful, isn't it, using Zoom today? But it's important to understand the context, I think. So there's lots of different flexible work options available, working from home, telecommuting, telework, whatever we want to call it. So we can include telework as part of flexible work, I think. We need to understand what the benefits are and what we're getting out of it for our organisation, because every organisation is different. And telework, I think, is complex because we're dealing with humans, we're dealing with people. So my view is that it's about working at the right place for the right, with the right people for the right type of work. So thank you. Question.
Well, that was excellent. That was excellent. For the folks as webinar participants, if you hover your cursor above the far upper left, you can pose questions, and I'll just open the screen here in terms of taking a look at some of the questions. But we should give folks a little bit of time to reflect on that, Yvette. But you know, one of the things, like the reason why I kind of tracked you down and twisted your arm to presenting this was, you know, greening government. And here you go. You went back and talked about going way back to, was it Alvin Toffler in the 70s? And, you know, I think Naisbitt in Megatrends even talked about this. And here we are, you know, like 30 years later, and we haven't reduced pollution, and we haven't really implemented telecommuting. So how come?
Well, this is why I was showing you about the complexity of it, because, and the key is management. The key is management. So we have the technology, we have the policies, we have the, like, all of those things can be managed, but it's about management. So it's about managers being having the skills to be able to manage their team to be able to produce the outcomes. And I just think that there is a big gap there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I mean, you would have thought that this would have been a natural thing. And like we're experiencing here, I know I've got a low bandwidth connection from my home, and I think Wendy's is the same. Maurice has got SuperNet, so he's got the fastest on the planet. But,
yeah.
But you would think that you could reduce our carbon footprint, and yet here we are, 30 years later, 3 decades, and as your research has demonstrated, we haven't really achieved it to the degree that we wanted.
No, not at all. So what are we going to do?
I think it's Wendy here. I think we need to put some real examples forward in our governments and through our partnership and stakeholder networks. Yesterday we had in southern Alberta, where I am, just horrible roads. They'd actually closed the roads that I have to travel through. So I stayed home and I Zoomed my counterparts in California state parks and set them up for our video conferencing series in January. It was totally seamless for them. They're totally into this. I Zoomed into another webinar that we hosted yesterday at lunch. I practiced some Zoom and trained some other stakeholders and set up Zoom meetings with ranchers in southern Alberta so they don't have to travel and they can participate in discussions and meetings and everything else. And so for me, they don't care where I am. It's the connectivity and the fact that this style of video conferencing creates that visual. And like you said, face-to-face, and then the next is video conferencing. And the people I've been doing this with love it, because it allows them to step into their meeting, their kitchen table, get it done, and then leave. You know, for ranchers, they're not off the farm. They're not, you know, asking their older children after school to do the majority of the chores while they're in the city or something like that. So, and I telecommute. I drive 45 minutes to an hour into Calgary to telecommute to my clients that I meet at the gas station in the morning. It doesn't make any sense, right?
Of course. But the thing is, I think it's about individuals and managers. So if your manager is okay, otherwise yesterday you would have had to take a day off, right? So it just makes perfect sense to be able to do that. I think it's just, and I just think that there is still a lot of people out there that just don't, some people still really like going to the office every day.
Yeah, we've got a comment that I think is really quite fascinating. It's a person commented, I have connected via iPad, iPhone, and old computer. The audio is very good, and I'm on Shaw. I can imagine using this quite easily with many different people. Excellent way to connect from the home or office. So I guess we kind of got a kudos or a plug on the flexibility of the current offering that we just did, which I love to hear. Thanks so much for that comment. And I would ask if there's any other questions. But one comment that I'd like to make while we wait for other folks to post questions was, and this is related to you, Wendy, and your collaboration with the RISE network, and it's particularly a question and discussion about co-work centers, because Yvette, there is a consortium of public libraries in southern Alberta, basically Calgary South, and I think there's approximately 90 public libraries that have a combination of high-speed internet and Tandberg video conferencing. And to me, the whole idea of co-work centers would be a real natural fit with all of those public libraries. So I'm really fascinated to find out sort of, well, what the heck is this co-work centers and how does it work?
Yeah, well, in Australia we've got, and I know in other places as well, there's lots of different formats. So, for example, we've got Hub Australia. So there are those hubs are set up for small businesses and entrepreneurs. And then there are others that are set up just for, for the IT sector. And there are smart work centres that are being set up by the New South Wales government for in areas sort of still in Sydney, but sort of like an hour's commute away. I suppose that's the best way to describe them, to encourage people to work more from those sorts of places. So so those people might be in government or sort of large banks and those sorts of, but that's still, the take-up rate is still very slow. And in some government agencies, so one of the ideas with the previous federal government is that they were trying to get government agencies to implement telework as a, they had telework pilots. So, but a lot of those telework pilots, when the new government came in, I'm not sure that they actually eventuated to much, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm. Well, the other thing that I've read is the relationship to smart cities. I think it was Amsterdam had their version of co-work centers, and are you familiar with that?
Yeah, that's where they started. Yeah,
in Amsterdam.
Yeah, so Amsterdam was one of the first. They started off with these co-working centres, but there are people can go and work in. They can take their laptops and tablets and things to cafes and connect. So there's all different ways that you can do that. But the issue still is about management, about managers being okay with that. So managers being able to manage outcomes rather than how many hours that you're working. Those sorts of things are still problematic.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's interesting. Okay, so we've got a question here. What I am finding is coworkers are teleconferencing within the office building for our meetings because they want access to their dashboard on their PC for information and not be face-to-face in the room. So that's a surprise to me. I wouldn't have I know lots of folks within our agency, Environment and Parks. Of course, we do lots of teleconferences and lots of web conferences and video conferences. But it's kind of the challenge is all the technology and the ease of use, I think. So we've got another comment here. Do you have any examples of education and training programs for telework for government, for example, Yvette?
No, there were some. Certainly in the Australian context, back in 2012, 2013, with the previous government, there was a lot of work around the education and about tools. So there was a lot of education. So there were seminars. I went to Canberra for one of these in order to do some education and try and develop some more awareness about what some of the issues might be and what some of the tools might be and what some of the issues might be. But a lot of that, once the government changed, went by the wayside, and that's why I started off talking about government policy. I think government policy and support is really important.
Well, I guess. Okay.
Sorry. I just want to make a comment about one of the other questions about people who perhaps do live meeting right in the same office. And I think that having access to your documents, your dashboards is important because there's meetings to discuss. You're transcribing, you're doing all these things. And there's often reference material that would add value and richness and reach to that. And when I use Zoom or we do Google Docs or those things, I find it really fascinating because you can transcribe all your minutes, you can capture everything, you can share documents, you could have people and using Zoom in a breakout session, working on documents and editing them and bringing them back to the team. So you can have a really robust meeting because everyone's connected and they're actually working during that meeting. They're just not passively discussing or sharing or, those things. So I think it's the nature of meetings get more robust when you have these electronic tools and everyone can work at it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, there's another comment that I'll read. It's quite interesting. Having run a consulting business from home for a couple of years, there was no doubt savings because you did not need to pay for office space. However, there were times when it was isolating and you just wanted that random coffee chat or ability to pull some folks together and work out a problem on a whiteboard. I think you need a balance. The ability to be creative tended to be more scheduled because you needed to set up meetings. So that's one comment. And I think, Yvette, that's something that your research has been supporting as well, that balance.
Yeah, those hubs. So with these hubs in Melbourne and Sydney and Adelaide, and I think there's one in Perth now. They have a newsletter that goes out once every couple of weeks, I think, and then they do lots of social things. And I went to visit the one in Melbourne, and in Melbourne they have a big kitchen with a great big table, and they encourage everybody to have lunch there together, right? And then they have things like, and then they'll have, they'll invite people into, that they'll have particular sessions on entrepreneurship or you know, financing your business and those sorts of things that people can go to and connect. So that's the idea, is that rather than people working from home and being isolated, they can go to these places and they can actually get some other contact, not just social contact, but also connections to help them with their business. So I think it's a very good idea.
Excellent. Well, there's another question here, pretty challenging question, so here goes.
Okay.
How do you create buy-in from the decision makers in government to allow the use of such innovative technology when they spent tons of money and time on systems that are unreliable at the best of time and have limited flexibility, such as joining a meeting presentation from your workspace, home or office? So there's a tough one.
Well, I don't know if there's an answer to that, because I think this is a problem. This is generally a problem with, you know, I gave the example of telehealth before, where I was talking about how like general practitioners were trying to, you know, facilitate a specialist consult in rural and remote areas, and they use Skype. And a lot of them said that the reason why they don't go to the local hospital and use the government systems is because they are inflexible, they don't work well, you can't log in and all that sort of thing. So this is a very good point. I don't know how problem, but it's a very good point, because at the end of the day, what we want to do is we want to do this sort of thing. If we want to connect and have a discussion about this, then this is how we want to do it. We want to do it so it's, you know, we might have to, you know, it hasn't taken hours to become familiar with the technology. We've just been able to connect and be able to do it and then talk to each other. And that's what people want. They want intuitive systems that are easy to use, that aren't going to cost them a fortune. But a lot of governments, and the issue with governments, of course, is security and privacy issues. So I'm not quite sure how you fix that.
Well, another great question that's come in is, do you have an example of how telework has benefited rural economic development or resilience? For example, people as staying in smaller communities because telework leverage where they can live and the lifestyle. You know, so say if you want to, you know, live in the mountains or out on the plains or wherever. Like my wife and I, we chose to live close by equestrian trails. So you know, I mean, this can rural economic development, so to speak. Is there any research that supports that, or anybody doing that?
Yeah, there is. What I know that our government has tried to encourage people to move into more rural and regional areas. Okay, so trying to get people to do that. So with the National Broadband Network, what they have done is they've installed that not too much in Sydney. Well, they have a little bit, but in more regional areas. So in big regional sort of centres, to encourage people to be able to sort of work from home and connect to cities and those sorts of things. So that's definitely been happening here.
Well, I guess we're getting close to 8 o'clock, and I would pose one more question for you.
Do you want me to put the next slide up, which is the next?
Oh,
webinar?
Certainly, that would be great. Sure.
Okay, there you go.
Yeah. So, but one last question for you, Yvette, and if you had ultimate power to influence the government of Alberta, what kind of recommendations would you make to the government of Alberta related to telework? And you know, it's a Greening Government speaker series, but just feel free to say anything for us to consider.
Well, I think it's really important that the government is supportive and that they have the policies in place. So they make it so that the policies about making sure that there is a flexible work policy that includes telework, that is more than the right to request. So it encourages employees to be able to go to their organisations and say, I want this work environment, and the legislation says I can do this way. Because sometimes unless you force that, it's not going to happen. So I think that's quite important, because at the moment, I'm not sure about your government, but in terms of being not having the employees are at a bit of a disadvantage, I think, because they've got the right to request this particular work arrangement, but they don't have the right to be able to do it. So I think that would help get it off the ground. And then the other thing is those examples I gave you about Telework Week is having some emphasis on a week where, you encourage everybody to work from home for 1 or 2 days, that sort of thing. I think that also would help quite a lot, because that helped quite a lot here. There were all sorts of incentives for people to be able to do that.
Mm-hmm. Now, there's a couple of comments. I'm not quite sure that I fully understand the question, but I think what their question was, Yvette, was how broadly has your research been shared? And certainly, I guess I should ask you now, because I'm recording this presentation, whether or not we can share it through our partner site. The Municipal Climate Change Action Center has been posting all of the presentations to their YouTube channel. So I better get that straight right now from you, whether you're okay for us to post that.
Yes, that's fine. Yeah.
Well, that's good to hear, because it's been an absolutely fascinating presentation, and like this viewer had asked, they're kind of keen to get access to it. Now,
you're welcome. You're welcome.
Oh, yeah. That's wonderful. So I would provide the opportunity to the other panelists, Wendy and Maurice, if they have any questions before we sort of conclude the presentation. We're a little bit over our time, but Wendy and Maurice, do you have any questions you want to pose before we close for the evening?
I've got one, if I may, and it's in regards to the fourth slide on technology, where you.
Fourth slide on technology.
The fourth slide on technology. I don't see a page number in it, or if it's there. You say
communication technologies. This one.
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
The first line there under number 1, face-to-face contact is the richest communication.
Oh yes.
Media. So Ted, about a week ago or 2 maybe, said in an email, I went to this event and there were 30 people there, and it was open for Q&A, and nobody asked a question, as if, because I'm in the room with maybe my supervisor, or manager, or director, or an ADM, or whatever, I don't have the courage to ask the question. But if I was at my workstation looking at my dashboard and maybe I'm anonymous or whatever, I'm going to ask the question because I've got the courage, just because of the technology. So I would argue that maybe face-to-face is good, but it depends. And this kind of technology where I can raise my hand at an appropriate time, and we have Q&A technology, surveys, and et cetera, in some ways that might actually be better. Ted's laughing because that was his observation. And I agree with it.
Yeah. So I would give the last question to Wendy, and then we should let Yvette go, I think.
I wonder, Yvette, I think back to one of the earlier comments, is how is this information or research shared with perhaps the Alberta government and our managers? I wonder if it's appropriate at some point we invite you back to do a presentation to our HR people, because we do have a quasi-flex telework policy loose, but it's really, in my opinion, underdeveloped because it hasn't looked at this kind of technology and the richness and reach of something like Zoom or sort of this digital social innovation of the 21st century, which you talk about, is this is how people connect. And where we are, and in my region, I have the largest region in our work environment. And I think the benefits of this evening is I'm doing it from the comfort of the home office, whereas, you know, normally this would be in some library or, you know, some other community hall or some other space, and you know, the overtime and everything else to create this chat and dialogue just becomes overwhelming, and we're not connecting with our stakeholders or our publics in meaningful ways, where this kind of technology, you know, they'll be able to do it from their smart TV and their couch, right? And I think this is really exciting for me, who does education and outreach. And so I think it's important to have you come back in some form and speak to our HRs and those enlightened managers who actually get how this is beneficial to the work we do as public servants.
Yeah, happy to help. Yes. Well, Ted, we did it, didn't we? I mean, it's just getting the time. It's just getting the times right, because you guys are like it's lunchtime. Well, what time is it? It's like 2:10 on Friday afternoon here, and it's
5 after 8.
Yes, yeah. So you know, once we got the time right, we were okay. It's yeah. But Wendy, happy to help. Yes, happy to be involved. Yeah.
Well, you know, Yvette, I'm so happy that you were so generous with your time and expertise and agreed to participate. You know, this is a lot of folks were very interested in this presentation, and I'm so happy to hear that I can share that presentation with our partner. So thanks so much for being willing to do this. It was a fantastic presentation. Thanks so much, Yvette.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Thanks. It was great.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.